Welcome back to another edition of Baseball for Maniacs. The topic of this episode is going to be, do the Phillies have the best rotation in Major League Baseball? So basically, I think they have a very strong argument. But at the end all be all, the most important thing is health by the time of October. You can have the best rotation in April. You can have the best rotation in May. And yes, that will help you get there. It's very important to have as much starting pitching throughout the season because, of course, you have to get there, right? But I think a keen example is the Los Angeles Dodgers and how they kind of mapped out their rotation. And I think they're going to do it again in the sense of like they were ready to go in October. They had their dogs waiting. Yamamoto, Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow. They were all ready to go by the time they faced the Philadelphia Phillies in the National League Division Series, to where that is the most important thing. Now, granted, the Dodgers have so much starting pitching depth to where they can afford to kind of slow roll their guys into the season, combined with as much firepower they have on the offensive side, in the bullpen, in the minor leagues, to where Blake Snell's going to start the year on the IL. And I'm not saying that the Dodgers are just, it's a fake injury. He pitched in the playoffs. He pitched the full playoffs, to where I'm sure that shoulder is, hurting, but it just shows you how their depth on their team lends them to have the ability that other teams don't. So that's just going into it, to where whoever has the best rotation in April, that might not be the case, but I'm just going to go through the Phillies mainly and some other teams that could kind of compete in that starting pitching depth. And before I get into the Phillies, like prime example, Zach Wheeler went down in April. Now, it was thoracic outlet syndrome, to where it's like, I don't know if there was anything that could have been done to prevent that. That was a freak injury, but it just shows you not having your ace clearly attributes to not having postseason success. But besides the Phillies, you got Seattle. Seattle has a great rotation. They got a great team. They're my pick to go to the American League Championship Series. I think Detroit's going to actually be the representative of the American League in the World Series, but I have them face it off against Seattle. But overall, with their depth, I think Seattle clearly has a great rotation. The Los Angeles Dodgers clearly have a great rotation. What they did to us in the National League Division Series was unbelievable. Yamamoto, his World Series performance, quite literally maybe the best pitching performance of all time. You could say Mad Bum what he did against the Royals in the 2014 World Series, but Yamamoto pitched 96 pitches in Game 6 and then pitched the next day in Game 7 and helped win that World Series. So the Dodgers are clearly a threat. The Yankees, if they're fully healthy, and of course, this whole thing matters in October, who's healthy, who's not. But if the Yankees, with their starting pitching depth, Max Fried, Carlos Rodon, Luis Hill, Cam Schittler, probably botched his name, my apologies. But it just shows you that there's a lot of good starting pitching depth. But let's get into the Philadelphia Phillies, because that's why you guys are here. Zach Wheeler is the X factor, right? So Zach Wheeler is set to throw 40 pitches on Monday in a minor league game on the backfield, to where I expect him to be back maybe mid-April, late April. I think it's going to be before May. The original timetable was early May, but he's progressed in his recovery process. He says he feels the exact same. Everyone says the stuff looks great. If Zach Wheeler can continue to be the Zach Wheeler we've had in Philadelphia, that changes everything. Of course, for the season, but mainly the postseason. Because I truly think if Zach Wheeler was available for the National League Division Series, we win that series, just because Game 1, Christopher Sanchez, he pitched good. He pitched phenomenal. But he did give up those 2 runs, and he didn't make it out of the 6th. If Zach Wheeler has a start in Game 1 of the 2025 National League Division Series that he had against the Mets the previous year, like 7 scoreless, I think we win that game. And then all the pressure is on Los Angeles, because you got Christopher Sanchez ready to go. To where I think Zach Wheeler just ties everything into this rotation, to where if you can have a 1-2 of Zach Wheeler, Christopher Sanchez going to the playoffs, I don't care who it is. You have the advantage from the pitching side in the sense of the Philadelphia Phillies. I don't care if it's the Dodgers. I don't care if it's the Mets, the Brewers. I don't care if it's the Blue Jays in the World Series, Tigers, Seattle. Those top 2, no one's touching that. And then Christopher Sanchez, just named the opening day starter today by Rob Thompson. I mean, the ascension of Christopher Sanchez is unbelievable, because we traded him for Curtis Mean with the Tampa Bay Rays. We fleeced the Rays, and that doesn't happen just because the Rays are such a good organization. And Christopher Sanchez, he always had the arm, right? He always had the stuff. He was pumping 99, but with Christopher Sanchez, he couldn't get the control, right? So he didn't know where it was going. And then in 2023, They worked on just focusing on throwing strikes, taking some off the velocity to where in 23, when he came up as the fifth starter, he was pumping 94, 95, but he had the 99 in the tank, but he had to learn the control. Once he learned the control, and now he's pumping 98 mile per hour fastball sinkers. That is what has led to Christopher Sanchez, in my opinion, being the second best left-hander in Major League Baseball. Obviously, it's Tarek Skubal, and then the second argument you could say is Garrett Crochet. But if you look at the stats, Christopher Sanchez is slightly better. So I just think him, one, leading the rotation to the season up until Zach Wheeler comes back, he's one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball. I think there's a real chance he wins the National League Cy Young. Of course, you got Paul Skeens in Pittsburgh. Paul Skeens, American hero, what he did against the Dominican, just phenomenal. And I also want to get into the point of that Dominican United States game. The Dominican lineup, in my opinion, was the best lineup ever assembled 1 through 9, and pitching shut them down because the old phrase that everyone comes back to, great pitching beats great hitting any day of the week, to where all the Philadelphia Phillies fans who might have this feeling of doom and gloom just because of how good the Dodgers are, if our rotation is lined up with health and our pitchers are pitching like they need to be, we can beat the Dodgers. Do the Dodgers have the clear advantage? Absolutely. But especially in a short series, in a 5-game series, we saw how close it was in 2025. The Phillies can absolutely beat the Dodgers. And even if it is a 7-game series in the National League Championship Series, which of course we prefer because you want to face the Dodgers as late as possible, you could still beat them. And then God forbid the bats get hot for one series. I don't know if that's going to happen. The Philadelphia Phillies have a real chance. But let's get into the third guy, Jesus Luzardo. I personally think Jesus Luzardo is going to finish top 5 in the National League Cy Young voting, and his performance in spring training shows that. That fastball is there. The changeup is there. And Jesus Luzardo also made an adjustment to where he threw much more sinkers towards the middle and end of last year because his fastball was getting rocked. And that's a Caleb Cotham thing, to where Caleb Cotham is one of the best pitching coaches in baseball, if not the best, and he just sees pitchers and he makes adjustments to where I think Jesus Luzardo, in his second full year under Caleb Cotham, is going to take that next step. And even that next step in the sense of he was phenomenal in 2025. You take out those 2 blow-up starts where he was tipping pitches, he had a 3.03 ERA. Combine that with what he did in the postseason, I truly think the extension was phenomenal. I think they had to get it done because with that level of talent, even with the injury concern, and we're going to have to watch that because Jesus Luzardo hasn't thrown 2 full seasons back to back in his entire career. I just think Jesus Luzardo, for that money, you take that risk with the potential upside of that arm. And I date it back to Zach Wheeler coming to the Philadelphia Phillies in 2020, which can be considered the greatest signing in Philadelphia Phillies history from a free agent. You could say Bryce, you can say Zach. I don't care which one you say, they're both phenomenal. But he came to Philadelphia with some injury concerns. He had Tommy John. He missed a decent amount of starts to where I think Jesus Luzardo is on the Zach Wheeler trajectory. And if he puts together even a season like 2025, I personally think he's going to have a better season. That 3, Wheeler, Sanchez, Luzardo, especially going into a playoff series, my God. Now let's get into some of the other pitchers in our rotation. Aaron Nola, very divisive Philadelphia Philly. Some people hate him, some people love him. I personally love Aaron Nola because he's a Philly, homegrown, probably going to end with the most strikeouts or second most strikeouts in Philadelphia Phillies history behind Steve Carlton. And the thing about Aaron Nola, he struggled mightily in 2025, right? But we got to realize Aaron Nola has logged one of the most amount of innings out of any major league pitcher over the past 6-7 years, to where I think in 2025 it kind of caught up to him, to where I think that lends into 2026 in the sense of he missed a lot of time, so he gave his arm some rest, to where I think Nola is primed to have a bounce back season. He pitched phenomenal in the WBC, pitched really good in those few spring training tune-up starts before pitching for Team Italy. The fastball's up to 94, 95. If we can get Nola at a 3.8 or 3.9 ERA and logs those innings to where in the postseason, I think it's going to be Wheeler, Sanchez, Luzardo. Nola can pitch a game 4, or Painter, who's ever pitching well. I just think that's going to be so beneficial in the sense of keeping this rotation healthy. And I'm going to go back to this before I get into Andrew Painter. Even year Nola is a real thing. I promise you. I'm super excited for Aaron Nola. I think he's going to have a bounce back year. Now let's get into Andrew Painter, the prospect we've been hearing about for years, the quote unquote best pitching prospect in baseball. Obviously, I don't think he's that right now just due to the Tommy John, all that kind of stuff, his fastball not having the life it had before Tommy John. But Andrew Painter had a 2.31 ERA this spring training, to where I saw all these people on Twitter talking about the fastball shape, all that kind of stuff. And yes, it matters, to where like it's not just nerds talking baseball, just talk baseball. What they're saying is very factual, but results are the end all be all, to where I think Andrew Painter is going to take that confidence. And he was just told today that he's going to be on the opening day roster. He's going to make the 5th start of the year against Washington. I believe it's Tuesday, April 1st. I think Andrew Painter, if he can log you 150, 160 innings at a 4 ERA, I just think that's going to be super beneficial. Now, some people might say a 4 ERA for the top pitching prospect in baseball, even though he has that, what's the word, like energy around him of being like the next great thing. It takes time for pitchers to develop in Major League Baseball. I don't care who you are, Clayton Kershaw, Justin Verlander, Garrett Cole, it takes time, to where I think this year is just getting accumulated to Major League Baseball, logging in those innings, being in the show, being in a pennant race is only going to take him to the next level for future seasons. But even if he has a 4 ERA, that's still productive out of your 4th or 5th spot in Major League Baseball. So I'm very excited for Andrew Painter. And then the last starter, which is going to be our 5th starter going to the year, but most likely going to transition to the bullpen when Zach Wheeler comes back, is going to be Taijuan Walker. So Taijuan Walker has had an up and down Phillies career. We all know that. 23, he pitched okay, not great. It was like to the tune of a 4 ERA, but he pitched like 170 innings. Didn't make the playoff roster, obviously, because we couldn't have him starting playoff games. But if Taijuan Walker's your 5th starter and he gives you the production he had last year, because I think it's going to be that same hybrid role of going from the rotation to the bullpen, back to the rotation if there's an injury, I think that's very valuable in Major League Baseball, because it's not an easy task to be going back and forth, because you get stretched out, then you're pitching 2 innings, then you're pitching 1 inning, then you got to go back to the rotation if there's an injury, then you got to get built up again, to where I think having Taijuan Walker in your rotation, granted, is he overpaid at $18 million for a hybrid guy? Absolutely. But the contract doesn't matter in the sense of what we're doing for the 2026 season. So I think Taijuan Walker is going to be very effective, very valuable. I'm going to guess maybe a 4.2, 4.3 ERA in his totality between the bullpen and starting, to where I feel like that's just going to help this rotation get to where it needs to be in October. So that's kind of my preview on the Philadelphia Phillies rotation. And again, the end all be all is where these starting pitchers are in October. If we can get them to a point to where it's game 1, Wheeler, game 2, Sanchez, game 3, Luzardo, game 4 could be Painter or Aaron Nola, who's ever pitching the best, and then the other one goes to the bullpen, we are going to put ourselves in a prime position to compete for a World Series. And I think the Philadelphia Phillies are leaning towards the model of prioritizing bullpen and starting pitching, because if you have good pitching, you could win no matter what your lineup is doing. Of course, if the bats don't hit, the same thing's going to happen. That's the end all be all of Phillies baseball and really any team competing for a World Series. But in the sense of the rotation, we are never going to go into a season, as long as everyone is on the trajectory for the next few years, we still make those signings. If we have good starting pitching, we can compete for a World Series year in and year out. And I think that's what John Middleton's doing. I think that's what Dave Dombrowski's doing, what Preston Mattingly is doing, in my opinion, the next Philadelphia Phillies president of baseball operations, to where we are in a very good spot. You should be very excited for Philadelphia Phillies baseball going into the 2026 season. And I think starting pitching is the main reason for that. But let me know what you guys think. What do you think about Wheeler, Sanchez, Luzardo, Nola, Painter, Walker? Where do you think this is all going to fit? How do you think they're going to do? Do you think they have a realistic chance of winning a World Series? I do, but I know a lot of people don't. So drop your opinions in the comments. Let me know on TikTok, Instagram, whatever you guys need to do. Get in this discussion. Let's talk Phillies baseball, because we are getting so close to opening day. Thursday, 4:15 against the Texas Rangers, Christopher Sanchez versus Nathan Eovaldi. I can't wait. But that'll do it for this episode of Baseball for Maniacs. And as always, go Phils.